Hey everyone, Joe Waxman here, and today I want to look at the chart of Steve Carell from The Office, one of the best sitcoms of all time, one of them. So, yeah, I'm gonna share my screen. A lot of people think so. I think so. Uh, love The Office. I love Steve Carell. I think he's great. Um, that's just my opinion, but yeah, he's cool. He's funny. All right. Just generally, it's a good idea to get an overview of the whole chart when you're looking at a chart, and we can just see like this waterfall, this flow, this cascade of planets. Throw in a few asteroids here just because they seem relevant. It's all flowing into the ascendant, if you can feel that, right? And this is not uncommon. A lot of celebrities have just such a huge ascendant. Oftentimes it could be the MC, descendant, but oftentimes it's very much the ascendant. And 12th house, packed 12th house is not uncommon either. But he's got a Leo sun and North Node in Leo, and then these three asteroids. And they're just relevant. They just add to the energy. It's not even that important what they are. They're just adding to that whole Leo energy. Leo's ruling the 12th house cusp. And I mean, technically they're in the 11th house, right? But the cusp is the 12th house. So it's 11th house of career success flowing into the 12th house. I mean, it's a little bit backwards because, if we're looking at whole sign houses, this is the first house. If we're looking at quadrants, this is the 12th house. But what you can tell is that it's flowing into the 12th house cusp, it's flowing into the ascendant. And when it's a little confusing, then what you can do is use the cusp. Whatever's closest to the cusp on either side has the most influence to that house. So for instance, 12th house cusp. Whatever's really close to the 12th house cusp is going to be more 12th house influence. Whatever's closer to the first house cusp is going to be more first house influence. And Mercury and Pluto are kind of in between, if you notice. They have the same energy as the ascendant in Virgo. And Mercury is, exalted in Virgo, and it gains directional strength in the first house. But by quadrant, it's in the 12th house. So it has some influence of both. And obviously for an actor, 12th house is not so bad. Or for any artist or creative type. And one of the reasons for that, and this goes for all the water houses, is kind of has to do with the nature of water, that it's hidden. I saw a video recently that kind of annoyed me that someone was making a case that the 12th house is not hidden and it's not secretive and it's fully, transparent because that's where the sun rises. I'm like, it's just not very deep thinking because you know what? The sun rises over the ocean, but that's when there's the most glare and you cannot see into the water when there's a lot of sun. But what that indicates is that there's two sides to water, above the water and below the water. And when you're above the water, all you're getting is a glare. And that's why actors often have water nature, especially 12th house, because it's that glare, it's that alter ego. You often see politicians with 12th house because, again, alter ego. Politicians are notorious for just being like, I'm going to give you everything you want. Right? You're going to get this and that and free stuff, and we're going to lower tax. And then they do exactly the opposite, and they just don't even whatever, because they're acting. They're actors. We have an actor for president right now, 100% an actor. And people think, oh, he doesn't lie. Well, he's acting, so you can't tell. He's a good actor because he's the 12th house, right? And same thing with any actor. They don't look like they're lying, but that's essentially what acting is. It's really good at lying, like really, really good at lying. And you're telling me that a really good liar is not secretive? Maybe you just don't even know what, maybe you can't see beneath the water. But me being water natured, I know what's beneath the water. Anyway, that's just a little pet peeve of mine. But the 12th house is excellent for acting because of that hidden side. We're not seeing when we're watching The Office, we're seeing a reflection of who Steve Carell is. We're not seeing the actual Steve Carell. And same for I mean, that's obvious, and but it's the same for every actor. We're seeing a an alter ego, right? They're not going to deviate tremendously from who they are. That's also very obvious. You're going to see reflections of their characters in their chart, and nobody's going to play a character that's grammatically different from who they are in real life. They're doing an exaggerated version of who they really are. And we can see that through astrology every single time. It's like, oh, wow, this person is really good at these kind of roles because that's basically who they are. And Steve Carell is no different. I mean, he's Leo in the 12th house is perfect for an actor. Leo loves attention. Leo represents fame. It's, you know, the king, ego, pride. So all that. And the 12th house is that alter ego. Now, Uranus is not too far from the sun, and that's okay. We don't want, you know, anything that's too close to the sun is going to get burned. We don't want planets too close to the sun. The sun is huge, by the way. We forget when we're just looking at symbols how big the sun is and how big the influences are. Like sun versus Mercury, sun's influence is way bigger than Mercury's influence. The sun can influence a planet from much farther degrees than Mercury will influence a planet. Mercury needs to be much closer. The moon needs to be much closer to a planet to have influence. The moon is passive. The moon will take influence from other planets. Mercury will take more influence because it's so small, but the sun is putting out influence. But the sun, whenever it gets close to a planet, does take on the qualities of that planet. So this, in this case, is taking on Uranian qualities, which are independent mind, uniqueness, just out of the box thinking, quirkiness. And Uranus, like Aquarius, can take on different forms. Sometimes it's just very inventive and idea oriented. Other times it's, you know, and this is like all, it's going to be dependent on the rest of the chart, which way it goes. But it can be musical because of the rhythmic nature of Uranus, like now, 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 now. That's Uranian as well, that beat, because it's always just right now. Uranus does not want anything to do with the past or any other influence. It's just now, 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 now. So, but it's also humor because of its ability to just be completely absurd, completely spontaneous. You know, spontaneity is very funny when somebody can just like out of the, you know, blue, just blurt out something and you're like, whoa, and you start laughing because that's humor. So Uranus can be very funny, right? Mercury is conjunct Pluto in Virgo. Mercury, like I said, is exalted in Virgo and gains directional strength in the first house. Is it in the first house? Depends who you ask, but it is influencing the ascendant, not by a lot, but I mean, it's what, 18 degrees. So that's kind of, it's a long shot, but somewhat. Still in the same sign. So you might consider it 12th and first house. Either way, it's still very pertinent to Steve Carell's character. You know, Mercury in the first house is really good for comedians because, again, that spontaneity. Because Mercury in the first house is just, it's going to be very active, very present within the person's character. It's a mark of somebody who's very lucid and very, you know, just quick-minded, quick-witted, right? Mercury in the first house, right? Again, okay, so maybe it's in the 12th house partially, but it's also ruling the MC, the 10th house. So, you know, that's coming to him. And it's still, with all these planets here, it's flowing into the ascendant. You have to take the weight of the whole. And there's a lot of weight here. It's like a cascading waterfall flowing into the ascendant. So still powerful for the ascendant, the influence of all that. Now there's a strong opposition here between Moon, Chiron, and Jupiter in Pisces in the 6th house. And this is very interesting, actually, because Pisces is very creative, but sixth house is very mundane. And then Moon and Jupiter love each other, and Chiron is that sort of that weirdo. Like I like to call it the wounded reject, because that's how it starts out. It's rejected by his mother, Chiron, mythologically, and then he gets wounded by the poison arrow from Hercules that he actually made the poison for. So that's how Chiron starts out, like this wounded reject, this oddball, this goofball, this thing that people don't really, just doesn't fit. Great for comedy. Woody Allen does a great thing with Chiron. He has in his 10th house, and then his draconic Chiron's conjunct his ascendant. So he's very Chironic. Here we're seeing Steve Carell is also very Chironic. Jupiter is expanding it. Jupiter plays a great role in comedies. Comedians, by the way, they always have a very prominent Jupiter. Jupiter is in good dignity here in Pisces. And what's really interesting is that Pisces is of the 12th house, originally, and Virgo is of the 6th house. So these are opposed to each other. Both in excellent dignity. Jupiter ruling Pisces, co-ruling it along with Neptune, and then Mercury ruling and being exalted in Virgo here. But this is the 6th house, the house of mundane activity. And what was his hit? His first hit was The Office, obviously, and that was remains his biggest hit. He had a bunch of funny movies, but he'll always be synonymous with Michael Scott from The Office, and he made The Office. And what is the 6th house? An office. This is the main. This is like the daily grind. And what is Pisces? Fantasy, fiction. I mean, this is like he couldn't have found a better role for himself. What was he? The manager. Okay, Mercury, also the boss, Jupiter, right? Or the moon as well can play that mothering, nurturing role as well, like a similar type role. And that's what he was. This is so Michael Scott from The Office, this opposition. What else is interesting is that he did write some of the Office episodes, which would be a 6th house thing, also a Virgo thing. And he also did other activity while he was in the office. So this opposition, right? He was shooting movies while he was in the office, and there was often like a little bit of a conflict there. And he made The Office, so they allowed it, but there was this opposition, which is very present here. And then Mercury conjunct Pluto, he does do that switch over to more dramatic roles. He has more dramatic movies, and that's the Pluto. Like he can do comedy, and the comedy is here. You probably wouldn't think Saturn in Aquarius, but South Node conjunct Saturn in Aquarius in the 5th house. That's where the funny bone comes from, because South Node shows a natural skill, something we inherit from a past life, or just we're born with it. It just comes naturally to us. And he is kind of Saturnian, if you hadn't noticed, this very dry sense of humor that is incredibly funny. And Saturn does, Saturn is the co-ruler of Aquarius. So, and he has the other side of Aquarius here with the sun. It's out of sign natally, but still close enough to the sun, where he's getting the full Aquarian vibe. South Node Saturn in Aquarius, Sun conjunct Uranus. And you're always, maybe not always, but often, very often, more often than not, you're going to see a strong Aquarian influence with comedians, the good ones anyway. And it's 5th house of creativity. Saturn's ruling the 5th and 6th house cusp. Jupiter's ruling the 7th and 4th. But the 7th is interesting because he met his wife in show business. He was teaching an improv class. Okay, so improv is Pisces, classroom, teaching is Jupiter. Class is, work, job. So that's, and wife, obviously, again, a Jupiter. So here. So that's very interesting. He has Neptune in the second house. I didn't read anything about this, and that's square to Mars. Okay, so Mars, I forgot Mars. Mars is super prominent in conjunct MC in Gemini. That alone, Mars in Gemini conjunct the MC shows that he's just, first of all, Mars conjunct the MC, which I have as well. Super hard working towards their career. They're putting all their energy towards their career. It's an excellent spot for Mars. Gemini, obviously, for communication. Mars is ruling the third house cusp and the eighth house cusp. And I think, so the third house cusp is obvious for communication, writing, expression, all that. And so he writes and directs and produces, movies and stuff like that. Like he works a lot behind the scenes. So that's very, big part of it. But plus Mars is ruling the expression. But he didn't achieve, he had a late start. And I think that's partially because Mars is ruling the eighth house and it is daytime, so it's a malefic. So his public perception took time because whatever planets you have in the 10th house is how you're perceived. I mean, the MC is basically how you're perceived by the public. Mars is malefic, especially in the day chart. And if it's ruling the eighth house, he's not gaining recognition easily. Like it's going to take some time for him to be recognized, for him to be appreciated, because it's, Mars in Gemini is okay. It's not like Mars in Aries or Mars in Scorpio, but and it would be even worse if it was Mars in Cancer, or Mars in Libra. But because it's neutral, but because it's ruling the eighth house, it took some time. The eighth house is not a house that is going to produce easy results. It's a difficult house, obviously. So yeah, but it does show, a lot of hard work towards career endeavors, a lot of energy and drive towards that. It is, what is that? It's not a quincunx, it's just a square and a half, basically, to Neptune in the second house. So he might, I didn't read anything about this, but he might squander his finances. He might be a spendthrift, spending too much money here and there. And he might have, it doesn't look like I think he's very well disciplined, but if not for this Saturn, I would say issues with drugs and alcohol, because that Mars in bad and in difficult aspect to Neptune, especially in the second house, relates to taste, what we have a taste for, consumption, because it's the second house, the mouth. So, Neptune relates to drugs and alcohol, and Mars can be, that aggressive quality in bad aspect to, and it's in Scorpio too. So I think he's disciplined enough to avoid that, and he doesn't look like it, but otherwise, this could be a nasty combination for just losing all of his finances and, having a excessive taste for drugs and alcohol. But he's probably avoided that. Otherwise, he's got so much dignity in his planets. Sun in domicile, Mercury exalted and in domicile, Venus in domicile, Jupiter in domicile, Moon, Jupiter, wide conjunction, but still conjunction, Saturn in domicile. I mean, damn, the guy's stacked. And he seems like it. Like planets in dignity act very well. They act good. They do the right thing, right? They're above boards. And he's like Mr. Clean, right? I want to bring his draconic chart because it shows even more. Speaking of Mr. Clean, Saturn right on the ascendant in Virgo, right? He's Mr. Proper Virgo, Mr. Respected Saturn Virgo, right? He feels very mature and Saturnian, authoritative, even though he's super funny. Like he is kind of a boss. He's, we expect him to have leadership positions, and he feels that on the inside. let's see here. We have a reinforcement with Mars in Aquarius. So that Aquarian fifth house vibe. And again, Mars is ruling the third house cusp, third and the fifth. That's very good for creativity. Sun in Aries conjunct Uranus in the seventh house. So an exalted sun in the seventh house. That's excellent for showbiz. Not great for relationships, too much ego, but and this is how he feels on the inside. Remember, this is not what we're seeing. It's what he's feeling on the inside. So we're getting like a glow, a sense of that. Sort of like a moon sign. Like you don't really see the moon sign, you feel the moon sign. We feel this a little bit, but he feels it on the inside, and he's really projecting this. So his confidence is coming out, very strongly with the crowd, with the masses. Remember, the seventh house is not just relationships, it's also the masses, the public. So like just the large crowds of people. And he's very confident relating to them. And with the Uranus is bringing out his goofiness, his uniqueness. Venus again, Venus still in, great dignity here in Taurus. Ascendant in Taurus, the Venus is strengthening his draconic ascending because of the, good dignity here. This is eighth house. So, he can do serious movies. This Pluto conjunct Mercury in Taurus in the eighth, draconic eighth, or draconic overlay in the eighth. Because it's in the same position. So this would be in the 12th if we just did the draconic, but that's why you do the overlay, because you need to see the influence on the natal chart. So he has a very serious side as well. That eighth house is like deep and secretive and dark and heavy. That Pluto. So he can play those serious roles, and he does do a good job with that as well. Neptune conjunct the MC here in Cancer, 1 degree. Again, we always see something like this. Very strong Neptune in actors and artists and Hollywood types. Yeah. So I think his draconic chart, and then these, Moon, Chiron, Jupiter, it's on the second house cup. So for actors, we often see that second house influence for the voice speaking ability. So that's very prominent as well. What else? Very strong air influence. I mean, it's not an exact trine, but we are getting a lot of Aquarius, Libra, and Gemini. Gemini MC and Mars. So he's very mental, quick-witted, probably great at comic writing as well as acting. So that's pretty much Steve Carell. Really makes sense. And there's nothing negative to say about Steve Carell as far as I can tell. I mean, he's got such a strong Saturn, it just keeps him in line. And that's really nice. I think it's very refreshing because so many Hollywood celebrities are, just corrupted by their money and their easy life. They just become like, low lives, even if they're good actors and they can put on a good show. Once if you dig beneath the surface, they're really like, they can just become corrupt, degenerates. I have not heard anything about Steve Carell, anything bad at all. And that's quite good. So hats off to Steve Carell. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. And as always, book a reading with me. I'm available for readings. And if you want to book a reading, like if you're really interested, but you can't afford it, just let me know. I can do a sliding scale. Anyway, go to my website, macroastrology.com, or email me at macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. Again, the likes really help. So if you do like it, don't forget to hit like. All right, guys, thanks. Bye.